Well, number 5, I'm going to go with Michigan. They still have Denard Robinson, which is why they're at number 5, but that's frankly the only reason. Their defense is terrible. Their offense got exposed a little bit against Michigan State. Robinson is still a very dynamic quarterback. He still will fuel them to some more wins. But out of necessity, I had to just grab Michigan for number 5. Number 4, I'm going with Wisconsin. They have the best O-line in the Big Ten. They have a huge game coming up here against Ohio State. James White and John Clay have been remarkable at running the ball so far this season. Scott Tolzien is still a pretty efficient quarterback. Their defense, though, is just average. It ranks right in the middle of the Big Ten. And at number 3, I'm going to go with Iowa. As Alex said, after this weekend, we have no quality wins because we really found out a lot about Penn State, that they do not have a good team this year. Rob Bolden is really struggling at quarterback. Penn State just has no offense, but Iowa, I still believe, has the best defense in the Big Ten. I think we will beat Michigan State down the road, but as of now, I can't justify putting Iowa at number 2 with the teams that Michigan State has beat, and that's why I have Michigan State at number 2. They have 3 impressive wins already this year, against Notre Dame, against Wisconsin, and against Michigan last week. Although I think Michigan was a little overranked going into that game, Michigan is still a top 25 team. Kirk Cousins is a very good quarterback for Michigan State. Their running backs, Baker and Bell, put up some big numbers against Michigan. They have a pretty good, solid D. I really like Michigan State at number 2. They're a dark horse for the Big Ten. As Alex said before, they do not have to play Ohio State, which is a huge advantage this year with how good Ohio State is. Their biggest game is at Kinnick. If they can win that one, they might run the table this season. Number 1, I'm going to have Ohio State. They're the number 1 team in the country. They have the best balance in the Big Ten in terms of offense and defense. It's debatable whether or not they have a better defense than Iowa. If they don't, they're definitely number 2. Their offense has been very explosive. Terrell Pryor is a great quarterback. They have a lot of balance on offense with a great O-line, great wide receiving core. Ohio State's the team to beat at this point.
Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same list. Guys.
Michigan, the Big Ten's just not as exciting as this.
Michigan at 5, Wisconsin at 4, Iowa at 3, Michigan State 2, and of course Ohio State, the Buckeyes at number 1. There's a lot of interesting dynamics going on in this conference right now. I think Wisconsin, their ability to run the football along with Michigan State makes them very dangerous teams in the long run. And I think Ohio State is going to be interesting to see how their defense matches up against that offensive line and the powerful running attack of John Clay and James White. And if Scott Tolzien continues to improve, then Wisconsin could end up moving up later in the season. And Iowa, again, they have not beaten anybody of note this season. The Penn State win is still big because it's a conference win, but Illinois thrashing Penn State in Happy Valley, getting the program's first win at Penn State in their history is fascinating. So it'll be interesting to see Illinois, how they do against Michigan State this weekend, see if they can maybe shock the Big Ten world and catch Michigan State in a trap game. And, Michigan State in the past has been notorious for having trap weeks or trap months, especially in October or November.
And the best part about Iowa's situation is they can prove themselves down the stretch. And I know we talked about just looking at the records, looking at the stands right now, they don't have that quality win, but got to play Wisconsin still, got to play Michigan, got to play Michigan State, and they got to play Ohio State. 4 games right there, which Iowa can come in and prove how good of a team they are, because at the end of the year, they will sit atop the Big Ten Conference when they beat Ohio State in Kinnick Stadium on Senior Day, and it'll be one of the greatest days of my life.
And an interesting note, Ohio State not running the ball, Sane and Herron not running the ball nearly as effectively this season as they were last year. Pryor has 354 rushing yards. Daniel Herron has 355, so Pryor nearly leading the team in rushing. That's definitely going to have to change as they get deeper into the Big Ten season.
That's right. And now let's pick some games this weekend, some interesting matchups this weekend, and we'll start in the SEC. We talked a lot about that conference earlier, but this is one that is going to affect those power ratings that we were talking about, as number 12 Arkansas travels to Auburn to take on the 7th-ranked Auburn Tigers. For the first time since 2004, Auburn is 6-0, and these are the 2 best offenses in the SEC. And when it comes to Auburn, I love Cam Newton. 12 touchdowns through the air, 9 touchdowns on the ground. And here's an interesting stat for you about Auburn. They have won 60 consecutive games when they have scored 30 or more points. If Auburn puts up more than 30 points, they're winning this game because of Cam Newton, because of the way I talked about earlier how they play defense in the 4th quarter, because of the fact they're just finding ways to win close games. I like Auburn at home to win this game. Mike, what say you?
I said at the beginning of the year that I thought Arkansas was the second best team in the SEC West. Whether or not that's true now, we'll have to see how that goes. But I think Arkansas goes into Auburn and gets a win. You got to remember last year, Auburn started the season 5-0, putting up huge numbers, but their defense gave up a lot of points last year. Again this year, 10th in the conference in scoring defense. Not impressive. I like Arkansas to go in with their passing attack, with their wide receivers, Adams, Childs, some of those guys to come in and get the job done. Ryan Mallett, he has thrown 6 interceptions this year, and he only had 7 all of last year, so they're going to have to shore that up. But I like Arkansas to go in and sort of shock the college football world and get a big win.
And Ryan Mallett, I believe he only has one SEC road win as the quarterback at Arkansas. Jake.
Well, I am really excited to see these two quarterbacks square off against each other. Cam Newton and Ryan Mallett get it done in very different ways. Cam Newton leads an Auburn offense that leads the SEC in rushing. Ryan Mallett leads an Arkansas team that leads the SEC in passing. This is going to be two very explosive offenses. The thing that I think it comes down to is defense. And Alex likes to say that Auburn's defense comes up when it's big in the fourth quarter. Well, points in the first quarter count just as much as points in the second quarter. Overall, Arkansas has the better defense. They will win this game behind Ryan Mallett, behind that explosive offense. They're going to put up some big numbers against Auburn's defense. I like them to go to Auburn and pull out a big win, and that's why I have Auburn down at number 5 in my power rankings.
Let's say this. Arkansas, they haven't played anybody all year. They haven't been tested all year. Arkansas, the only big game they lost. That was to Alabama, and they choked it away.
There's no shame in losing to Alabama.
There isn't any shame in losing to Alabama. South Carolina beat them.
Right, and it'll be big to
14.
see if Ryan Mallett can pick up his game in the fourth quarter. He didn't do that against Alabama. I think he'll have a better performance against a much worse defense on the
Auburn,
road this week.
They've been tested. They've come through in the clutch. I don't care that they won ugly. They're winning. It's at home. It's a night game. War Eagle takes this one. Auburn
I love when
wins.
people say they come through in the clutch. That's another way of just saying that they have been a lucky football team so far this year. And
Iowa came through in the
Arkansas
clutch
is gonna
last year.
Expose them for being lucky so
Arkansas,
far.
yeah. Ryan Mallett win a big-time game on the road, then we can come talk to me. Number 1, Ohio State, at number 18, Wisconsin. Speaking about coaches that never win big games, Brett Bielema has only won one game versus a ranked conference opponent. That's right, Bielema. You don't win the games versus big teams. As I said earlier, Ohio State, they're really balanced. 40 points a game. They have one of the best defenses in the Big Ten, only behind Iowa, who has the best defense in the Big Ten. And then just remember this, Wisconsin only tested once this year. They lost by double digits to Michigan State, who is a good team, but when you're Wisconsin and you're touted as a contender for the conference, you can't do that. I like Ohio State to win this game. Close, but all that stuff about jump around at Camp Randall doesn't really make a difference. Ohio State wins, Mike.
I think the Buckeyes are also going to win, and I think the key is Terrell Pryor throwing the football against the Wisconsin secondary. Wisconsin secondary is the one part of that football team that has some major deficiencies, some questions. Jay Valai didn't see the field nearly as much as people thought he was going to against Minnesota because he's battling some injuries. I like Ohio State, Terrell Pryor again carrying this team late in the fourth quarter like he did in 2008 in Madison, driving down, getting a win late in the fourth quarter. This game's going to be close. John Clay and James White are both tremendous running backs, but I think Ohio State, in the end, playing truss ball, get the job done. Low scoring, though.
Well, last year the score between these two teams was 31-13 in favor of Ohio State. Although that score is a little misleading, Wisconsin actually outgained Ohio State in that game by almost 200 yards. And Alex said before that Bielema really has not had too many big games won under his belt, but this week he has the best offensive line in the Big Ten at Camp Randall. He's going against Ohio State, who has looked all right in the Big Ten so far. And he has Scott Tolzien, who ranked number 1 last year in the Big Ten in passing efficiency. Madison is a very tough place to play at, and he's going to prove that he cannot win the Big Ten.
Oh, you had me going there, Jake. Jeez.
Ohio State's going to win this game. They're the number 1 team in the country. Bielema, if you win a big game, then I'll believe it. Until then, I'm going to pick Ohio State. I can't pick Wisconsin.
It's like you said, Alex, the last 3 ranked opponents who've come into Camp Randall, Iowa, Penn State, Ohio State, all left with a big W on their bus or plane on the way home and a big L on the Wisconsin scoreboard.
Oh, yeah. Big W on the helmet, big L on the forehead for Bielema, big L on the scoreboard for Bielema because he doesn't win those big games. Minnesota at Purdue. Purdue is coming off a big win at number 25 Northwestern, where they had to break in their third-string quarterback. I think this is an interesting matchup because you got Purdue's defensive line, which actually is 4th in college football in sacks. So they got a pretty good pass rush. And Minnesota's offensive line isn't really that bad. They only average about allowing 1 sack a game. So I think that's the matchup that I'm interested in seeing. Minnesota has won the last 2 versus Purdue. I actually like Minnesota. I think Tim Brewster goes into this game. He finally realized that this is a game where they got a chance in. Purdue, off an emotional – I'm just laughing even saying this because it's ridiculous I'm picking Minnesota. But honestly, Purdue, they had that emotional high off that game last week. I think Purdue's still a struggling team. I mean, they had to block 2 kicks to win last week at Ryan Field, which looked like a high school game under the lights in front of about, 15, 20,000 people. I don't know. I don't have a good reason because Minnesota is awful and they're the worst team in the Big Ten. But I seriously think Minnesota goes to West Lafayette. Tim Brewster makes it 3 in a row versus Purdue. And then he'll lose a lot more games and get fired at the end of the year. But at least he can hang his hat on this one. Jake, do you have any faith in the Gophers?
It's really tough to have any faith at all in the Gophers. Purdue's a team, though, that I'm not going to sleep on. They won 4 games in the Big Ten last year, including a big one against Ohio State. It's not easy to win in Evanston. Just ask Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa Hawkeyes. We haven't had great success in Evanston in the past.
Yeah.
Rob Henry, the freshman quarterback for Purdue, has not had a lot of success throwing the ball, but he did run for over 100 yards against Northwestern last week. I think Purdue's going to boil her up at home. They're going to beat Minnesota.
Yeah, I like Purdue to win. Rob Henry didn't look great last week against Northwestern, but I think Purdue, defensively led by Ryan Kerrigan, get the job done. Minnesota doesn't do a lot early in ball games on offense, and they're going to lose late in the game in the trenches.
Iowa taking on Michigan in Ann Arbor. It ought to be a big game. And this is just an interesting matchup of contrasting styles. You take a look at Iowa, number 1 in the NCAA in total defense. Michigan 3rd in total offense. Michigan 6th in rushing offense. But the Iowa Hawkeyes are the only Division I team that have not allowed a touchdown on the ground all year. The only team in the FBS that can say that is the Iowa Hawkeyes. 6 of the last 10 games in this series have been decided by 6 points or less. So I'm feeling it's going to be a close game, but Michigan State was able to force Denard Robinson to make key mistakes in the red zone. I think the Hawkeyes are going to do the same thing. They go to Ann Arbor, they get a close win. As Kirk Ferentz gets his 2nd win in Ann Arbor at Michigan Stadium. Mike, what do you got in this one?
I think the difference in this ballgame is the turnover battle. I think Michigan last year against Iowa, 5 turnovers. I think this year we're going to see a similar trend. Michigan will move the ball inside the 20s against the bend but don't break defense, but Michigan will continue to turn the ball over in Iowa, led by senior quarterback Ricky Stanzi, who's had a tremendous season so far. I think he gets the job done. Iowa puts points on the board and limits Michigan's ability to get big plays, and that's the difference. I like the Hawkeyes to win this game by between 10 and 14 points in Ann Arbor.
Jake.
Well, Michigan has the most explosive player in the Big Ten. Unfortunately, they have one of the worst, the worst defense in the Big Ten. They have one of the worst passing defenses in the country, and they're allowing over 300 passing yards a game. Ricky Stanzi comes into this game in the top 5 in the country, best in the Big Ten in passing efficiency. Iowa's going to put up a lot of points. If Michigan State can hold Michigan to 17 points, I believe Iowa can as well. I think Iowa wins by at least 2 scores.
For Mike Rabin and Jake Burgers, I'm Alex Salzma. Good night and go Hawks.